Hey guys, great to have you here. I'm excited. We got a question from George about Daniel chapter 8 relating to Saddam Hussein and Khamenei. And we're going to take a look at that and see what you guys think. Okay, so George, he has a question about the two horns. And he's wondering, now look at how methodical he is in laying out this question. This is fantastic. The two horns of the ram in Daniel chapter 8 have been identified as Khamenei of Iran and Erdogan of Turkey. Yes, I have identified those two individuals as the two horns. However, there is a small geographical flaw in this theory. Turkey was only partially contained within the ancient territories of Media and Persia. In contrast, both modern-day Iran and Iraq were fully situated within the heart of the ancient empire. So you mentioned two empires, Media and Persia, and you're right. In the ancient Media map that I could find, Turkey is part of the ancient Media area. Now, as we know, areas flow. And I don't know if it took in more of it at any one time or not, but absolutely right. Far as I can see, it took in part of it at one time. Now, you're also absolutely right that when you take a look at Iraq and Iran, oh yeah, those are definitely within the Media and Persia Empire area. So, he has the question, could the first horn actually have been Saddam Hussein? He rose in power in 1979 and turned Iraq into the dominant regional force for decades before being removed by the RAM, the USA. Now, so I got your question. And he did rise in power before Khamenei, and Khamenei did become higher than him. So I can see where you're coming from on that. For those who are going, what are you guys talking about? Over here, I got Daniel chapter 8. In verse 3, this is where it really starts to relate to our day. Verses 1 and 2, just more of a setup. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. So he sees a ram, two horns. One horn comes up first. Now, and they both end up being high. But it's the second one that becomes higher than the first. And so what does that mean? If we go over to verse 20, this is the angel giving the interpretation. So in the first verses, we have Daniel that is seeing the imagery, and he's describing it. In the later verses over here, we have the angel that is saying, okay, this is what the imagery means. And so it's important to remember that. Now, so here's the answer. Verse 20, the ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. All right. So he's saying, okay, could one of the horns be Saddam Hussein? In this case, it would have to be the Media one. And the Media one would have come up first, And then the Persia one would be Khamenei, and he came up second. Okay, interesting question. Does it hold water? Well, let's look at verse 4. What is the ram supposed to do? Verse 4, I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. So, test number 1, did Saddam Hussein and Khamenei push to the west, north, and south? Test number 2, the east is not mentioned. So, for kicks and giggles, it would be interesting to know if they pushed to the east or not. Oh, the plot thickens. And what we can do, we can go to Grok. And over here at Grok, I have the question, can a case be made between Saddam Hussein and Ayatollah Khamenei? They pushed to the west, north, and south in the Middle East. And Grok says, yes, that case can be made. Okay? So now, we have pushing to the west, north, and south, yes. And then Khamenei became higher than Saddam Hussein, so that checked out. Then I asked, can the case be made that either or both pushed to the east in the Middle East area? No. Wow. So that lines up as well. So far we're 3 for 3. That's pretty impressive right there, George. That's like, wow. Yeah. So now what we got to do is we got to take a closer look at verses 5 through 8 and then the interpretation. So for verses 3 and 4, valid case. Does it hold water when we get to verses 5 through 8? Well, 5 through 7, really. And then the answers, which are in verses 21 and 22. So verse 5. Now, again, this is the imagery that Daniel is seeing. And this is not the answer, but it's the imagery. So, as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. So at the time that the goat that has a notable horn between his eyes comes from the west on the face of the whole earth and touching not the ground, he's going to be attacking the ram that has the 2 horns, not the 1 horn, the 2 horns. Let's go ahead and read about that in verse 6. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns. So at the time that the goat with the notable horn comes from the west and goes to attack the ram, at that time he attacks the ram has 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his 2 horns. And there was no power in the ram to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hands. Now, let's go ahead and look at what the angel can tell us about the answer. the rough goat, so we're talking one rough goat, is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes, which is the one goat, one horn, is the first king that's being referred to in Daniel chapter 8 about the leader of Grecia. So at the time that this he-goat comes from the west on the face of the whole earth, it is at the time in which both the king of Persia and the king of Media is pushing to the west, north, and south, and not to the east. And he breaks both of them, not one. So because of those details right there, then it rules out Saddam Hussein. Trump wasn't in power. He did not take out Saddam Hussein. And so even though we started off 3 for 3 on it, when it gets right down to it, it doesn't hold water for the really crucial part. And so I hope that helps you out. And great question. Thank you so much. Okay, guys, have a good day. God bless.